On this edition of Glace Bay Files, we'll talk with James Edwards, the president of the Glace Bay Minor Hockey Association, the man who spearheaded this effort to chronicle the history of Glace Bay minor hockey. Also, we'll talk with Fraser Macaulay, one of the first guys from Glace Bay to make it to major junior hockey. Also, we'll get a chance to talk with former National Hockey League player Doug Solomon. All that and more on Glace Bay Hockey Files. The history of hockey in Glace Bay is rich, and there are many characters, there are many players who have come through not only the ice lanes of the Miners Forum in Glace Bay, but also the newer building, the Bayplex. With me is the president of the Glace Bay Minor Hockey Association, James Edwards. James, I think it's important as we move along here, especially teams like the Cinderella Miners, is that we have a history that's preserved in an archive so that youngsters or people that just want to be able to look at it have some place where they can go to see what the history of Glace Bay hockey is like.
That's right, Dave. We're looking at doing exactly that, having a video archive of the history of hockey in Glace Bay, right from the start. We know the Miners Forum was built or opened, I guess, in '39, but there was even hockey before then. But certainly, if we can come up to give the community a historical reference of the great teams and the great players who've come through Glace Bay minor hockey over the years. Teams such as arguably the most famous team ever from Glace Bay, the Cinderella Miners in '55. There's also a great story of a team, a junior team in the '40s when they blocked the highway. These are types of stories that we think that our younger generation should know for generations to come. We want to capture all of the players right from the '40s and '50s. We want to know about the junior teams in the '60s, players who've gone on to professional semi-pro careers, like Dave Amadio and Sandy Snow, Doug Solomon, right up to Logan Shaw of the Florida Panthers this year. We want to have that archived and put right on our Glacier Minor Hockey site for generations to come, so people can look back and say, oh, that's what it was like, or that's somebody's grandfather, and even in currently female hockey is growing too, and for the last 10, 15 years. So we're going to have that archived as well.
One thing which is painfully true is that for a lot of the people that you just mentioned, and the Cinderella Miners, there's not that many of them left. And what I think we're going to try and do in this program is to interview as many of those people who have seen those games like the Cinderella Miners, or some of the great games that were at the Miners Forum against teams from the Maritime Major Hockey League. It really doesn't matter. But what we're trying to do is get those people front and center so people can hear what it was like in those days, and even some of the fans who came to the games. And I think that's what's important, to give the people that will see this in the archive some kind of feeling as to what hockey was like in those days in Glace Bay.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I can go back to the late '60s and '70s myself. I hear my brothers and my parents and the older people talking about teams like the Cinderella Miners and the like. But I remember the '72 Metro Bees, the Atlantic Canadian champions, and players like Dave McLean on that team. I always remember my father. I remember my father talking about how Freddie Courtney would lift the fans out of the seats with his end-to-end rushes in the Cinderella days. Well, I have that same memory about Dave McLean in the '72 Metro Bees. I was only a young fellow myself. I had the pleasure or privilege, I guess, of playing with Doug Solomon. And it was hard to play with Doug because it seemed like you were watching him more than playing with him. And then in later years, being involved with minor hockey, I had the privilege of watching guys like Logan Shaw come through the ranks and progress through his career. Brad Cuzner's playing for the the university championship this weekend. He and Logan, not only were they teammates, they were line mates for most of their minor hockey career. And there's lots of great minor hockey players. I remember the line of Struthers and Horrell and Mark Bourgeois. That's only maybe 10 years ago, the Bantam AAA line. And in all of my years of being involved and being associated with minor hockey, that has to rate as the best minor hockey line I've ever seen, including the line of Doug Solomon and Barry Campbell and Blaine Bourgeois. When Struthers and Horrell and Bourgeois were on the ice, man, the three of those guys had a nose for the net like no other threesome that I can remember. And those are the kind of memories that we'd like to pass on now in these days of YouTube and video and the like. There may be some video tape and the like of those guys playing, but certainly we want to have the historical reference as well.
Of course, you left out those great lines for St. Anthony's in the 60s.
I did. The LeBlanc brothers, Dave and Dennis LeBlanc, they were awesome, man, when they weren't in the box.
Yeah. The whole idea, and you have a lot of youngsters here today in the Bayplex in the skating program that you can hear and see, but for a lot of these young people, it doesn't have to be the older people that will want to go back and look at this. There's a lot of young people that can use these for the archives for school projects. Or the history of your town is very important, and if you let it slip away, you can't go and retrieve it. So this is the whole idea about the program that we're doing.
I had a call, what a great point. I had a call yesterday from a minor hockey parent. Her daughter is doing a school project as we speak on the Cinderella Miners. And here we are wanting to capture that information for the history of the town and the history of hockey in Glace Bay. So I told my friend, the parent, just wait a week or so. We'll have it all on videotape for you.
All right. So the Cinderella Miners will be the centerpiece of the program, and it's all about hockey in Glace Bay and the history of the sport. With us, James Edwards, the president of the Glace Bay Minor Hockey Association. And a big thank you to James Edwards for the effort he put in getting this program produced. In our next segment, we'll talk with Fraser Macaulay, one of the first players from Glace Bay to make it to Major Junior Hockey. Our series continues on the history of hockey in Glace Bay, and with me is Fraser Macaulay. Fraser, first of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Fraser, when we look at first of all, your picture in the Kitchener Rangers uniform, but what we're dealing with is I think the M in the minors. And if you're a kid like me in Glace Bay, one thing you wanted to wear was a uniform with an M on it.
Yes, that's for sure. It was the ultimate sort of thing. Through the years, you see the older kids going up and playing this organization, and being a hockey player. Yeah, you want to be part of that for sure. Yeah.
Take us back to how it all started. Who got you involved in the game, and who were some of your coaches?
It started at Brookside School. I think it was the third grade. Maybe Sammy Donovan, I believe at the time, had a Pee Wee team, and then eventually we had the Bantam Common School League with Jimmy Pike, and then of course you had Bugsy Seaward's clinic here in Glace Bay, and everybody wanted to be a part of that sort of thing. So.
Now, just dealing with that for just a moment, I think when Bob Seaward started that, or Bugsy as everybody knew him, that he was almost like a guy ahead of his time, wasn't he? Some of the coaching that he did and to get the guys ready for moving up the line.
Yes, definitely. To be honest with you, people were scratching their head. They're kind of like, okay, what's this all about? But, when you see guys playing and stuff like that and participating over the years, you can see the improvement. He was ahead of his time. I remember, he'd have you doing drills where other guys would have you going around cones and just skating, but he introduced the pucks sort of thing like the Europeans did years and years and years, and the guys developed. It was good.
Now, as you move along in hockey, I mean, even when you move up the line, but did you still think about some of the things that happened when you were younger, and some of the things that you learned from guys like Bugsy or Sammy Donovan or Jimmy Pike, things that you could kind of look back on in certain situations?
Yeah, definitely. These guys, they're great communicators. And the neat thing about being down here and playing here, you hear your parents talking, you hear your coaches talking about certain individuals, guys that were maybe your father's age at the time, and you always had the benefit, when you weren't playing down here, you're hanging around here, and you're coming down, you're watching the senior guys play, you're seeing the They had the Cape Breton Metros back then, and then you even had the commercial league here. And you go watch these guys, and you just watch these guys, and Vincie Ryan, guys like that, and watch them pick up a few of the drills and stuff like that, and just the way they seen the ice. And all these older guys are always willing to help you out. They see a small town, everybody knew who you were, seen you had potential. They're always giving you advice here and there. So yeah, it was good.
Now you can look back in the 30s and the 40s, and if you go through the chronologically through the history of hockey in Glace Bay, and there really weren't that many guys that were scouted or went away to play. There was a few, but I mean, you were one of the early guys, and there was yourself and Dougie, Phil McDonald before you, but that was the era that people just started to be scouted and move away to play the game. When you're a young guy in Glace Bay, from Kent Street off of Brookside Street, and you probably played a little bit on the harbor, you played in the ponds, you played at the Miners Forum, which is where we all played. A little bit, all of a sudden now you're thinking about going away. Someone's going to take you away to play hockey. A little bit tough to move away from Ma's cooking.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And really, when you're down here, you're like the big fish in the pond. You get up there, you're just another guy sort of thing. And you know what I mean? Like the thing is, growing up down here, it was a great place to grow up, and everybody knew you sort of thing. And you're up there, and you're just another number, another body sort of thing. Yeah, definitely an adjustment. But if you wanted to advance and do stuff, you had to make sacrifices, and that was part of the sacrifice.
Those moments up in Ontario and say, maybe I should go home. Maybe this is not for me.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially when you got your parents saying, you know what, you can always come home and you do that, but you had a goal and you want to reach it. You had to make sacrifices, right? So, and they looked after you pretty good up there.
You grow up in a hurry.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, you see a lot, and again down here, it's pretty unique down here. You get a lot of people that really care about you and stuff like that, and always want to help you. At times, you know what I mean? It's a business, and they introduce you to it, and it is a business. You can't perform, you move on.
One thing I've always said about the guys from Glace Bay that go away or they come back, or even I just moved to Sydney Forks, it's always good to see the guys from the Bay, and there's a bond there that I think between guys that are from Glace Bay that you don't have with anybody else, do you? If you're away and you see somebody from the Bay, it's always great to see them, to talk, ask about so-and-so.
Definitely. And, to be honest with you, at the time, like I said, it was just I started off in Quebec League, and Doug Sullivan was in the Ontario League. We kind of communicated at the odd time through phones. But being, being away for the first time, one guy sticks out in my mind. He's not a Bay boy, but he was a Cape Breton boy. It was Nelson Burton. And he kind of looked after us, and I only knew him to play against him and heard about him, and he had a great reputation, tough guy and good guy. And he always made a point of coming by and giving you advice and telling you what not to do and what to do, sort of thing. So Cape Bretoner sort of thing, and they look after their own and stuff like that, so that's good.
Okay, now you've been away for many years. You work and live in Ontario now, and that's where your home is. Tell me, when the Vince Ryan started, was that good news for you? Good chance to get back?
It was great news. I was we started coming down here about 22 years ago. It was actually Kenny Tracy, a guy who was quite involved here with the hockey program down here. He said, you got to get down here and do this thing. He says, great, you'll see people. It's a great social event. You get a chance to play with some old buddies and stuff like that. And you know what I mean? It's been great. I always look forward to March, that's for sure. It's always good you're like a little kid coming back down. It's almost like you've never grown up sort of thing. You see some friends you play with, and you have some good conversation with them and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's a great opportunity to come down and play. It's
always nice to give back to your community. Fraser, I know that you work for Kellogg's, and I think each year you bring down a tractor-trailer load of some food for the food bank here in Glace Bay.
Yeah. You know what? The company's been fantastic when it comes to that. They get it. They see the need down here. You know what I mean? And it's always good to give back, right? Because people down here have big hearts, and we've got great community and great people down here. And even to the point where, you know what, Kellogg's, they're always willing to give. But in terms of getting it down here, you know what I mean? They can't be responsible for that. And we got a company out of Sydney, this S&M Trucking, who've been fantastic. They've always, the answer is yes with them to get product down here. It's just a matter of just telling them when. So that's terrific, right? So it's all good.
Okay, one other thing, and that's, of course, we're talking about Glace Bay minor hockey and Glace Bay hockey, but now that you're home, I know there's a league here in Glace Bay called Huff and Puff League, and, we all like to get old enough to get there to play in it, I think, but the whole thing is it's a group of guys that you know of, you've played hockey with, you've talked to in Glace Bay, and these are guys that are playing the game the way it should be played. They get out twice a week, a couple of days a week, and they play the game. And I think you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, definitely. You know what it's you almost got to pinch yourself. I'm 57 years old, but these are guys. I'm down here playing with these guys, and it's great that they give me an opportunity to go out and kind of loosen up a bit so I don't embarrass myself. And but you're sitting with the Naish Battens and Cease McQueens and these guys and Rudy McDougall. These guys that you're, like I talked earlier in this program, going as a kid in the commercial league and picking up pointers from these guys, and these guys giving you a little pat in the back, hey kid, or shaking your head. Now you're actually playing with these guys. And you know what? When you get on the ice, these guys still got it, man. They're thinking, and they're a little bit of competitiveness there. We're having fun. But they're still polished, and these guys got to be knocking on 70, mid-70s, 80 years old. So, yeah, it's great. It's a lot of fun.
Fraser, thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Fraser Macaulay, another part of Glace Bay hockey history. It's interesting that Fraser Macaulay also played a lot of hockey with Doug Sullivan, who is our next guest. Now, Doug Sullivan played with the New York Rangers and was drafted first, 13th overall in the National Hockey League. He also played with the New Jersey Devils, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Hartford Whalers.
Must be a full moon because, holy cow, we've had our second fight here. Sullivan is really landing the blows on Allison. Allison hasn't even thrown a punch. He's trying vainly to hang on to tie Sullivan up, but Sullivan's been able to get that right hand loose and really throw some haymakers that have landed.
Both these teams are playing unbelievably inspired hockey here in this first one. I've got more fights.
We're with former National Hockey League player Simon Douglas Sullivan. Dougie, everyone knows you play in the National Hockey League, but we're talking with the Glace Bay Minor Hockey Association, the history of Glace Bay hockey. And let's go back to the beginning. I mean, it was not that long ago, but it was a while ago. And how did it all start? Where did you start playing your hockey? I'm even talking before you played at the Glace Bay Miners Forum. Where'd you play? Did you play up in the ball field in South Street? Or?
Yeah, probably was the great thing back then, and you don't see it as often these days, but my dad was, he would do anything for us as kids growing up. So we always had a pond or a rink in the backyard that he'd spend hours after work flooding. We'd sweep it off with a broom, and he'd be out there with the hose. There'd be snots hanging off his mustache, and that's really where it all started. I think the neighborhoods guys would get together and play on local ponds, and then we took it a step further, and he had snowbanks and street lights in our backyard that he wasn't supposed to have at the time, and made it all work for the neighborhood.
So what was the first team you actually played for? Was it like Brookside Street School, or was it South Street School, or who was your first team?
No, I can remember. Well, I was wearing my Toronto Maple Leafs jersey, playing was basically Bugsy Seward. He was the guy. We used to have to get up at 6 o'clock and be fully dressed and on the ice 6:30 in the morning before school on a Friday morning. And Bugsy, it was his hockey program that really had a big impact as far as organized hockey. So we used to do, it was all fundamentally based, skills, skating, the emphasis on skating. And the one thing about Bugsy that really stands out, and anyone who's through his program will tell you, if you had a curved stick at all, it was in the stands. He couldn't stand it. He says, you got to learn to play this game. You got to learn to use both sides of your stick, forehand, backhand. And with the emphasis on the fundamentals to that degree, I've seen him helicopter sticks, looking at a guy taking a shot, and it would go whistling by a goaltender's ear. And next thing you know, the stick is helicoptering into the stands, where he couldn't stand anyone using a stick to cheat. So he says, you're going to learn the skills, you got to learn them pure.
One thing I remember about Bob Seward, and I've said this before to a number of people, and you can probably testify to the fact that I think at that time, first of all, his Glace Bay Community Hockey Clinic was at that time a forerunner to minor hockey, because it was only common school hockey in those days, but that he was a man a little bit ahead of his time when it came to coaching.
Yeah, he was, and the thing is about Bugsy, he really genuinely cared about the kids. It wasn't just out there to put a program together. He, if anything, he deflected all the attention away from himself. And even to this day, people want to, bring attention and honor him in some way, but he would rather just have it be all about the purity of the sport. And I think that that made the biggest impact. We used to play those side-to-side rink games, after we do our skills, and then we just sort of put the nets against the boards and go sideways across the rink, and then you go to school in the morning. Just it was. I remember being half asleep and my dad dressing me, putting my hockey gear on, taping my shin pads, and lacing up my skates as a 5-6-year-old going to these games in the morning.
So take us beyond that. Now you're getting a little bit older. You're playing a little more hockey. You're playing minor hockey. You're playing with some your friends and that. But take us through the next couple of years.
Well, I think after that program, I think the next real hockey program would be with Brookside School. Jimmy Pike was the coach, and that was the Common School League, which I think, looking back, was some of the most fun I ever had. Brookside School, Central School, all the Dominion was in there, which seemed like it may as well have been in.
Don't forget St. Anthony's.
Rush St. Anthony's, yes, St. Anthony's, of course. So yeah, it was really amazing, well organized league, and even at a young age, you felt like that was your big leagues, to make a team and to play, in the Common School, which was after school, like on Wednesdays and Fridays during the week. And I remember there was times when I was, as I got into grade 7, and it was more of that's all Brookside School went to, was grade 7, and I'd been on the team for a couple of years and wasn't feeling good. I couldn't go to classes. I had strep throat or something, and I missed Monday through Thursday. And I remember Jimmy Pike called me up. He says, "You're coming to school tomorrow because we have a big game against Central." So somehow you get to go to school, and then if I was playing hockey, they'd have to shoot me to not let me play. So
one thing about that Common School League, I think, and you probably agree, is that the guys that you know from Glace Bay, guys that you met at that age, you played hockey against them. It could be 40 years down the road, and the reason you know that guy, you beat him somewhere, is because he could be from Bridgeport. You played hockey, you played Common School against him, and you might not know him that well, but you know who he is because for some reason you remember those things.
Yeah, it was a real melting pot, and you did get to know a lot of guys around town and in the communities. Absolutely, between playing against them and occasionally as you grew older and it got more distilled into the midget leagues or whatever later on, and the guys that you played against, like Barry Campbell and Bougie, Derek Bourgeois, and guys like that you just learned to play with and could appreciate because you knew how tough they were to play against.
Who did you emulate at that point? We're talking about hockey in Glace Bay, guys that you're still a kid, but guys that you kind of look up to, guys like that. Now for me, it was Naish Batten and Vincie Ryan and Freddie Courtney. But what about when you came along?
Well, I really admired the Glace Bay Miners. Roger Cousineau, believe it or not, he grew up down the street from me, and he was much older than I am. So it's at the time it seemed that way, but he was on the Metro B junior team, and I used to look up to him because I thought he was one of the purest skaters that I could recall in those days. So, there was guys from your neighborhood, guys playing on the junior A, junior B teams here locally that really made an impact.
Before we leave that era right now, besides hockey, but in the neighborhood and athletics and coming up, because you weren't just a hockey player. I mean, you played ball and that, but guys that I can think of when I think of the South Street area, I mean, there were so many good people around that had an effect on people in their athletics, and whether it's hockey or being in the community, guys like Harry McMullen and all those guys. And you can remember, I'm sure, a lot more, but I think they helped shape a guy like Doug Sullivan.
Yeah, you'd see guys like, baseball, like you get Jamesy Proctor, guys that were just heart and soul, pure, rugged athletes, and then they had no formal training. It was just raw talent. And guys in my neighborhood like Will Fogelvey, John Mulvihill lived across the street from me. These were great baseball players and great athletes in their day. So you didn't have to look very far, and I think that, if anything, Glace Bay was sort of like a sleeping giant in some ways. There's a lot of real talented people. Henry Bootler was another one, like great baseball mind, and Phil Hogan was another coach that I had in baseball growing up. And I mean, the ice was out of the rink here at the end of March, and for bingo. So you got to get the bingo in. I called cards at bingo in when there was a winner or whatever, and then the ice never went back in until October if you were lucky. So I see today the games, the way the players are sort of, I don't want to say brainwashed, but they're sold on the idea that if you're not constantly improving, you're falling behind. But I think that one of the coaches I had in the National Hockey, Freddie Shiro, thought, and I agree, and Wayne Gretzky even says the same thing, that the more sports you can play, you become a better athlete. And if you're a better athlete, you be a better hockey player. And it allows your hockey muscles to recover. I think that you get overtrained, I think, to some degree these days, and I don't think you need it. I think you need to be a kid. I think you need to go, play street hockey and broom ball and just go swimming down at the shore and all those things, and allow your muscles to recover, and then you're hungry when the hockey season begins again.
Okay, when you left Glace Bay, in terms of the minor hockey, we've gone through common school now. We're getting just a little bit older. You weren't playing 365 days a year because, as you mentioned, we didn't have 365 days a week hockey, and the odd guy that had some money went to either Antigonish or Kentfield to a hockey school. Okay, I don't know if you went to those, but where did it go from there? I mean, I know you didn't just play in Glace Bay, but you were a young guy playing even senior hockey. So where did it go?
Well, I remember when I did go to a hockey school, actually, up in St. Andrews by the sea, up in St. Andrews, New Brunswick. I went up with Fraser Macaulay. We were, best buddies growing up, and we went away to hockey school. We met a bunch of kids from Port Hawkesbury who, their father, the Carruthers family, and their father, Eldon Carruthers, was the head coach of their travel Pee-wee team. And then I remember Fraser and I being 12, 13 years old, getting asked to leave here and go up and travel and play in tournaments, all around the Maritimes and even down in Boston. And it was like some very good coaching, real good players. It was an all-star team. So even to this day, someone like Mickey Sutherland, who's our goalie, who's living in Australia now, I stay in touch with him on Facebook. And it was a real melting pot. And the McGinnis family and McDonald's from Port Hood. So, you get to know all of those guys, even at a very young age. And Mike McPhee, I played with Michael on that Port Hawkesbury team. So, and then from there, I think the next big impact would have been midget hockey, the Midget A League that started here, the inaugural season. And Blaise McDonald was our head coach at that time. And I remember walking in, and our jerseys were all hanging up, with the hockey pants and the blue helmets and the blue pants. And
big time.
Your name on the back of your jersey and the whole thing. And they really tried to bring, at a young age, that 14 to 16-year-old age bracket, a real professional atmosphere, which they did. And the coaching was phenomenal. And there was a lot of chalk talks and information to take home and study and learn about defensive responsibilities and power plays and how to forecheck. And it was an education, probably the best education that I got at a very young age from Blaise.
You did play some junior here and some senior in Glace Bay. Was that important to kind of moving into the Kitchener Rangers?
Very, very important. Yeah, I think to be at a young age, 16, my last year in town, to play and to experience Jigger Andrea, who was the head coach at that time, and to play with men at 16 years old, Rocky Ford and Jamesy Proctor was on the team, Saki Cormier. There's like some characters that, like I said, they were raw, talented, very skilled players, but they had heart, and it was something to see how they would suffer and block shots and pay a price to win games, and the camaraderie and the team building and how the game was bigger than them, and the appreciation they had for winning. So to experience that for 1 year here before going away, and it did prepare me for the junior hockey, because you go away, it's 16 turning 17. Even today, you see in the queue a kid coming in playing against a 19, 20-year-old. It's a man against a boy, really. So that was probably the best thing I could have had mentally, to be able to reach down and understand that those guys, you can't get a piece of them to stop them. You had to get 90% of them to stop them, and you're going to get knocked on your butt, and you just kept getting up and going. So you just can't have any quit.
Always good to talk with Dougie Solomon. In fact, we'll get a chance to talk with Dougie again in segment number 2 of that interview. And we'll also talk with members of the Cinderella Miners from the 50s. All that and more on Glace Bay Hockey Files.